The Chamber of Secrets this month is an amazing one. It's about the famous light and heavy chest of Robert-Houdin, a legendary prop that I think transcends just magic props and has worked its way into the history of magic. A lot of fascinating stories about it, some misinformation about it, but here's your chance to actually see the real light and heavy chest and to talk about how it was made and why it was made and what it did. So we'll start. So here we are with Genii Speaks, and we're coming to you from the actual Chamber of Secrets, that column that you've been reading in Genii for years and years. And this is the room, this is the place, and there's the guy, John Gaughan. And if I were a little closer right now, I would be probably have driven in and I'd be sitting in that chair next to him, which is really tempting because, of course, all those beautiful artifacts and all that wonderful magic all around it. But we're doing this by Zoom so that everyone can see it. And there in front of him is, in fact, the light and heavy chest. Right, John?
Robert-Houdin, yes.
Yeah.
And here it is. Randy Pritchford, of course, acquired this through Gabe's Potter and Potter auction several years ago. And we've been working on it and cleaning it up. And actually, last night, for the first time, we did a demonstration in a little playlet at the Magic Castle. And this was for the departure, the leaving of Richard Kaufman. So it was a great evening. It was had by all, as they say.
And it worked perfectly. Not that there's a lot of taxing things involved in it working, but it worked perfectly. Lived up to its name.
Yes.
Was very deceptive, and that is saying something because it was built in, we don't really know, but we think it was built in around 1846, 1847, right at the beginning of Robert-Houdin's career.
Probably, yeah. I know that Antonio, the trapeze performer, was built in 1848.
Okay.
And so that makes sense that this would show up a little bit earlier.
If you read, and in the column this month that John did, he talks about the prop. He offers beautiful photographs of the chest, and Dustin Stinnett writes with John and Jeff a really, really wonderful little brief history of the trick and where it all came from and how it was developed and where it ended up. But Robert-Houdin did it early in his career. He did it in Paris, actually, as the light and heavy chest, as a chest that would become heavy. And that's what he said it was. And he demonstrated it for his Parisian audiences. And it wasn't a big hit in his show then. But the reason we talk about it now is because, of course, he took it to Algeria and included that in that show. And so it had a starring role in that, at least according to Robert-Houdin. It was a feature. And it's been memorialized since then, probably exaggerated since then as well. But nonetheless, here is the chest that was built. So, John, it's basically wood, right? I mean, that's
right.
what the
Yeah,
audience perceives
it's
it.
a nice French mahogany, kind of like the woods that you would use on the dashboards of exotic cars back in the 20s and 30s. So it's a fine wood, and the hardware is unusual in that the hooks that he used here, rather than doing one that goes this way and one that comes back that way, they're both aimed the same way. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of unusual. But of course, there's so much up force on here. These catches have to be the real worker here, because as we know, this is the device that clicks it on down to the table is an electromagnet, not any catches or anything that snuck out of the bottom. And so from here to the bottom here, the old adage, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Right. Well, there are a lot of weak links in this thing down here. The handle and the wood joinery, even all the way down to there's a steel plate down in the bottom. This thing weighs a lot. And
It's
here's a
heavy.
steel
Even when it's
plate
light,
here.
it's heavy. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this attaches to the wood, attaches to the bolts that go through here. So that means that those holes in that soft mahogany have to be strong, or they're still tight.
Right.
And uh, while we got this thing upside down here, you can see the original Circus Museum inventory list. That was before. That was when all the equipment was given to the Circus Museum, and then next to that is after Ken Klosterman bought this. There's his inventory number down there too. So there's a little bit of the history in the chest, and it's had many other owners. I think Willard Smith was who Ken got it from, and then it goes back several generations before that.
And it was
So
was it through De Vere, do you think, in Paris that came? Because we don't know
yeah,
exactly where it came from, Robert-Houdin, how what that
yeah,
link
I
is.
have some letters or copies of letters from Charles de Vere
Yeah.
to Houdini,
Right.
where Charles de Vere, when he has the magic shop in Paris, he's offering him a list of Robert-Houdin's pieces, and this was in it, or a light box,
Similar. Yeah.
maybe. But anyway, the light and heavy chest was on that list,
Yeah.
and possibly Houdini bought it from Charles de Vere.
Yeah. It's interesting that as simple as it is, and you know what, obviously the headline and the reason it's interesting historically is that we used a principle that was relatively new at the time, electromagnetism. It had been
Yeah,
demonstrated.
electricity, even, yeah.
Right. But you make a really interesting point, which is that it still had to be very cleverly made, very solidly made, because that idea of having people pull on it, you know, with a kind of light handle, all giving you the impression that it's an
Yeah,
ordinary box. It takes quite a beating to be able to do that
yeah.
regularly.
Even here, you can see the huge hinges put in here. Um, so if this was just a jewelry box, wouldn't need to use anything like that.
Right. Right.
Here I am opening it up again and showing you more of the inside,
Right.
and you can see the hinges and how beefy they are.
Right.
Because these are just wood screws, but they're fairly long, metric, of course, over there, but they're about 1.5 inches long, and
Wow.
so
Yeah.
they dig in to hold all the parts and pieces together here.
Right. It's interesting because when I was writing about it in the column, you know, what's interesting about what you're doing and in this video, here's a graphic example of it, is that we see things that very often aren't the things that are photographed. You know, we're really good in the magic world of talking about the apparatus, but we always photograph it in the idealized way. And
Yes.
you know, here's the real thing. Here's the not only the real prop, but here's the secrets you have to take into account is how it's made and what the hardware is like and how he was disguising certain elements in it when he was building it. And that little handle is a gimmicky little handle because we think that it's at one point that delivered a shock to the person that was lifting it.
Yeah, that's kind of what's going on here.
Mhm.
And you can, no, you can't see.
There's a little element to it that there's an extra little portion of the handle that
Yeah,
creates a second
yeah,
connection.
here's a second level of brass here,
Mhm.
and it's adhered attached to the handle itself, but there is a layer of insulation in there. So you have, if you're going to be shocked, you of course need to get both sides of the battery, and you hold here, and when you touch that, that's when you get the electricity into your body.
Right.
So that's kind of cleverly made right there, and pretty well hidden out of the way. But the handle itself is kind of unusual here, just with this plate on here. There's a switch right here,
Mhm.
and we still do not know quite how it slides back and forth here. And so if you're holding it, you can push it forward, back and forth like that. But we haven't dug deep enough into the electronics here to figure out what that does, other than turn on the shocker.
Right.
And maybe it turns off the batteries, yeah, that bring this down to here, or does the electromagnet in the table, it adheres to the bottom of this thing. There's all sorts of stuff going on in here. Right. And this thing was restored by a friend of Ken Klosterman's named Carl Williams. And Carl was a real expert in electronics, and worked over at Lockheed in the skunk works. And so he was, I think he incorporated a lot of Lockheed's technology into here that wasn't in there when Robert-Houdin built it, let's say.
Right. Obviously there was a version of this from the 1850s, and then there was a version of it that was cleaned up.
And at this point, it's so many digitally printed circuit boards and all that stuff in all there, because Carl didn't bother to keep it original.
Right.
Even if you see the early pictures of this thing, it had a beautiful veneer on it from a different era, and Carl completely took all that off, unfortunately.
Yeah. If people look at the at your column in March, they'll see really wonderful close-up images of it. I know now you're sitting in a room and waving your hands around it, but there's some really beautiful photography. It shows you the hardware, shows you the nature of that handle, and also some historical drawings that show it kind of in action. At least imagine.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. Dustin is doing a good job on getting all that together.
Yeah. Well, what do you do? What do you do for next month? You close your eyes and swirl around the room and point, and then open your eyes and see what you're pointing at.
I wish I could do that.
How do you decide on the next piece?
Well, we got a half a dozen in the background, and
right.
And depending on how big it is, and we've got to, the shop is not very let's say tidy out there, and so to photograph things, we have to get seamless paper out and all of the accoutrements of a photography studio, even though we kind of don't know what we're doing when it comes to photography. So it's good to hear and now and then that the pictures look good.
No, and they're really something. I mean, people who obviously have been reading magic books, historical magic books, and books about apparatus appreciate this. They're really photographed in interesting ways, so that we're talking about technical aspects of a trick, and it's all that stuff you knew was there, but you didn't quite understand. And I know John's interest, having worked with him for years, is primarily wide in the field of apparatus. But I mean, I know your fondness is for wood, and kind of the grades of wood and the way stuff's turned and how that all interfaces with things. And so it's always interesting seeing kind of the quality of it, the craftsmanship of it, the artistry of it, with the mechanics and how those things all fit together into one.
Yeah, well, in my little woodworking world, I know how much had to go into any of these pieces in here. And it's always impresses me that they would go to that much time and energy, talent, just for a magic trick.
Yeah.
Just to fool someone.
I know
And
you
so you
wonder
can appreciate that.
how many lifetimes are represented in that apparatus?
Yeah,
How many careers are represented?
right. And if the piece could only tell a story, they
Yeah,
all have wonderful stories with them. It's
yeah,
just wonderful. And of course, the what drew me to it also was the craftsmanship and the quality of a hand built piece. So much of this stuff, while they came from a manufacturer, uh, especially European ones, there's still so much handwork into it, even though they might be making a half a dozen
right.
of these pieces around here. There's still so much handwork in that this vase is not quite the same as this vase, and they all kind of do it different. So,
Right. I mean, it's always interesting to me that, that in talking to you about this stuff, you can pick up a turned piece and say, "Oh, Carl Owen turned that," or Floyd Thayer turned that, because you can see things about it. I mean, I can't, but you can see their characteristics. It's like a signature, isn't it? It's like a handwriting.
yeah, right. Uh-huh. It's got its own signature to it, even though it's not written.
Right.
So,
And those guys are literally standing there with a tool, making each one of those individually, just like they would be writing it out by hand. So, yeah, those personalities are really represented in all that apparatus.
yeah, and you bring up Floyd Thayer, which is, I'm not sure it's in the picture, but cabinet back there,
Yeah.
and there are people that knew Floyd and used to go over to the shop, of course, when he's working, and he had the ability to do these complex things on a lathe and carry on a conversation with the person there, even though the chips are flying here and you're waiting for the thing to blow up in your face. So how they do that, I don't know.
I know that cabinet all the way in the back with the big red ball in the middle of it. I'll just explain. I know Genii readers have seen various things taken from that cabinet. That's all Thayer apparatus. Is that right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, all early Thayer,
All early Thayer, and
mostly
probably
wood
turned by
turners.
Thayer. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, Floyd Thayer, to me, was what I call a folk artist, in that he's influenced by the beauty of European magic apparatus, mostly made out of brass that has been nickel plated and polished and in the catalogs. And he being an expert wood turner himself, he copied these metal pieces only out of wood.
Right.
And so it's just like a folk artist would do nowadays. This is his version of their masterpiece.
Yeah.
And it all has the hand of Thayer in it, but it's his own way of performing the same trick from Europe.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's really beautiful, and it's interesting that it works on all those levels all at the same time, and then also is fooling people. Not all those tricks were massive foolers, but but like all dealer tricks, there were some great tricks and then some that were just pretty to look at. But
Yeah, well,
I will
you're
let
right.
that be the all-time tease to our Genii readers. You can look around that room and look at that stuff behind John, and those are many of those pieces. Some of those pieces are going to be upcoming pieces in the Chamber of Secrets, and you'll see another one in a couple months. So we'll see you in the
Yeah, and
pages.
a lot of them have been in there in the past.
Right, right.
We've been doing the Chamber of Secrets now for quite a few years, so um, there's still stuff
I know, and
to look at.
you're not running out. Of course, you're making some at the same time, but I don't think you're making them fast enough to stay ahead of it. No, it's great. It's great. And thanks for taking us through that amazing prop and letting us have a look at it in person. As again, people can see photographs of it in the March Genii and the story of the light and heavy chest. Thanks, John.
Well,
We'll see you soon.
thank you.
Thanks. Bye.